When HOA tyrant Patricia stole my 82-year-old disabled mother's heart monitor, calling it a toy, she nearly killed her. Fueled by rage, I exposed Patricia's illegal reign, rallied our community, and reclaimed justice, proving kindness can triumph over cruelty in a fight for what's right. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more Karen stories. The scream that woke me at 3 a.m. wasn't human. It was the sound of pure terror, the kind that cuts through your soul and makes your blood freeze. I ran to my mother's bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Mom was on the floor, clutching her chest, her face pale as paper. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her eyes wide with panic. "Mom? What's happening?" I dropped to my knees beside her, reaching for her wrist to check her pulse like the paramedics had taught me after her last heart attack. But her wrist was bare. Empty. The small, life-saving device that had monitored her heart rhythm for the past 8 months was gone. "My monitor," she gasped between painful breaths. "I can't. I don't know if my heart." I called 911 immediately, but those 15 minutes waiting for the ambulance felt like 15 hours. My 82-year-old disabled mother lay there, terrified, not knowing if her heart was about to stop, all because some power-hungry woman had stolen her medical device. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez looked furious when I explained what happened. "Someone took her heart monitor? Do they understand this woman has severe arrhythmia? Without monitoring, she could go into cardiac arrest and we wouldn't know until it's too late." Mom survived that night, but barely. The stress of not having her monitor had triggered dangerous irregular heartbeats. She spent 3 days in intensive care while I sat beside her bed, watching machines do the job her stolen device should have been doing at home. "Tell me exactly what happened," I said when she was finally stable enough to talk. Her voice was weak but filled with hurt. "I was in the garden yesterday, sitting on my favorite bench watching the sunset. You know how I love those few peaceful minutes before dinner." I nodded. "After Dad died 2 years ago, those sunset moments were her only source of joy. That woman came storming over," Mom continued, her hands shaking slightly. "Patricia Henderson. She was waving some papers and shouting about community violations." My jaw tightened. Patricia Henderson, our HOA president, who everyone secretly called Karen because of her endless complaints and power trips. She had made our small community a living hell for the past 2 years. She pointed at my heart monitor and said it was a children's toy, Mom whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "She said toys weren't allowed in common areas and that I was setting a bad example for families." "Did you explain what it was?" "Of course I did, Beta." She used the Urdu word for child that always warmed my heart. I showed her my prescription bottle, my medical bracelet, even pulled out the instruction manual from my purse. "I begged her to call you or Dr. Martinez." "What did she say?" Mom's voice broke. She laughed. She said old people always lie about medical conditions to get special treatment. Then she just snatched it right off my wrist. The strap broke and she threw it in her bag like it was garbage. My vision went red. This wasn't just theft, it was attempted murder. "I tried to follow her," Mom continued. "But you know how hard it is for me to walk with my bad hip. She was already gone when I got to the parking lot. I came home and cried all evening, knowing I had no way to monitor my heart. That's when the rage hit me. Not anger, pure, focused rage. Patricia Henderson had nearly killed my mother over what she thought was a toy. She had ignored medical evidence, dismissed an elderly woman's pleas, and stolen a life-saving device. But this time she had messed with the wrong family. I had been documenting Patricia's harassment for months. Every illegal fine, every unauthorized rule change, every time she exceeded her authority as HOA president. I was originally planning to present everything at the next board meeting, but now it was war. "Mom, I need you to rest. I'm going to get your monitor back, and I'm going to make sure Patricia Henderson never hurts another person in this community. Please be careful, Beta. She threatened to have us evicted if I caused any trouble." "Let her try." I spent the next day building a case that would destroy Patricia's reign of terror. First, I called Dr. Martinez and asked him to write a detailed letter explaining exactly how dangerous it was to remove Mom's monitor. His response was swift and damning. Next, I contacted every neighbor Patricia had bullied over the past 2 years. Mrs. Garcia, who had been fined $200 for having too many flowers in her window. The Johnson family, forced to remove their disabled son's wheelchair ramp because it didn't match building aesthetics. Mr. Pete, whose service dog was constantly harassed despite clear legal protections. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I actually read our HOA bylaws. What I found was beautiful and damning. Patricia had been breaking the law for 2 years straight. Every fine she issued required a community vote. Every rule she enforced needed board approval. Every decision she made unilaterally was completely illegal. But the most important discovery was Section 12.1. Any board member whose actions endanger the health and safety of residents is subject to immediate removal and potential criminal charges. Taking a heart monitor from an 82-year-old woman definitely qualified. I called the police next. Officer Rodriguez listened to my story with growing concern. So she took medical equipment from an elderly disabled woman? That's theft of medical devices, which is a felony in this state. Can you help us get it back? I'll need to see the medical documentation, but yes. If someone stole prescription medical equipment, we can definitely pursue charges. The emergency community meeting was scheduled for that evening. I sent notices to every resident, explaining that we had urgent HOA business regarding illegal actions by board members. By 7 p.m., our small community center was packed. Patricia walked in looking confident, probably expecting her usual audience of 5 or 6 people she could easily intimidate. Her face went white when she saw 60 angry neighbors filling every seat. "What is this circus?" she demanded. I stood up slowly, holding a thick folder of documents. "This is justice, Patricia. Something you've forgotten about. I don't have time for your complaints. If you have issues with HOA policies." "Sit down," Mrs. Garcia interrupted firmly. "Your reign of terror is over." I presented everything methodically. 2 years of illegal fines totaling over $15,000. Unauthorized rule changes that violated our community charter. Harassment complaints from dozens of residents. But the most serious charge, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, is the theft of medical equipment from an 82-year-old disabled woman. The room erupted. People shouted their own stories of harassment. Years of accumulated frustration poured out like a dam bursting. Patricia tried to defend herself. "That device looked like a toy. How was I supposed to know?" "Because she showed you her prescription." Mr. Pete interrupted. "Because she begged you to call her doctor. Because any decent human being would have listened. I was enforcing community standards." "Whose standards?" I asked calmly. "Because according to our bylaws, you haven't had the authority to enforce anything for 2 years. Every action you've taken has been illegal." I distributed copies of the relevant bylaws to everyone present. The crowd's anger turned to shock as they realized how completely Patricia had been violating their rights. "This woman has been acting like a dictator," I continued. "She's stolen our money through illegal fines. She's harassed disabled residents. And yesterday her actions nearly killed my mother." Officer Rodriguez chose that moment to enter the room, along with 2 other officers. "Patricia Henderson?" he asked. "Yes. You're under arrest for theft of medical equipment, harassment, and fraud." The room fell silent as Patricia was handcuffed. But before she was led away, Officer Rodriguez made an announcement. "We've searched Ms. Henderson's apartment and found numerous items that appear to have been confiscated from residents without legal authority. We'll need everyone to come identify your property." What they found in Patricia's apartment was shocking. She had been hoarding confiscated items for years like some twisted trophy collection. Children's bicycles, garden decorations, personal belongings, and yes, my mother's heart monitor sitting in a box labeled toys and junk. When I placed that small device back on my mother's wrist, she started crying. But these were tears of relief, not fear. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. "Last night I could feel my heart acting up, but I had no way to know if I was in danger." The community voted unanimously to dissolve the HOA board and start fresh with actual democratic processes. We also voted to pursue full legal action against Patricia for the harassment and theft. Over the following months, amazing things happened. Mrs. Garcia expanded her flower garden and started teaching neighborhood children about plants. The Johnsons not only rebuilt their son's ramp but organized wheelchair accessibility improvements throughout the community. Mr. Pete began offering free service dog training for anyone who needed it. Our community became what it should have always been, a place where neighbors helped each other instead of living in fear. Patricia's trial made local news. HOA President steals heart monitor from elderly woman, became a cautionary tale about unchecked power. She pled guilty to multiple charges and was sentenced to 2 years of community service, specifically helping elderly and disabled residents. The judge's words stayed with me. "You spent years making vulnerable people's lives harder. Now you'll spend years making their lives easier." 6 months later, Mom still sits in the garden every evening, watching the sunset from her favorite bench. But now she's surrounded by friends, all of them wearing flowers from Mrs. Garcia's garden, while Mr. Pete's service dog keeps them company. Every evening, I check Mom's heart monitor readings on my phone, grateful for the steady beeps that mean she's safe, and proud that our community finally learned to fight back against bullies. The best revenge isn't getting even, it's making sure the bullies can never hurt anyone again, while building something beautiful from the destruction they caused. Patricia learned that stealing from elderly disabled people has consequences. And our community learned that when good people stand together, they can defeat any tyrant, even one with an HOA badge and a God complex. The heart monitor beeps steadily now, a gentle reminder that my mother is safe, surrounded by love, in a community where kindness finally triumphed over cruelty. I had watched this woman torment our neighbors for 2 years. She had fined Mrs. Garcia for having too many flowers in her window box. She made the Johnson family remove their child's wheelchair ramp because it didn't match the building's aesthetic. She even called animal control on Mr. Pete's service dog, claiming it was too large for apartment living. But this? Taking a medical device from an 82-year-old disabled woman? This was war. Mom, get dressed. We're getting your monitor back. No, Beta, please. I don't want trouble. She said she'd have us evicted if I complained. Let her try. I helped my mother into her best dress, the blue one with tiny flowers that made her feel pretty. If we were going to confront the HOA queen, we were going to do it with dignity. The HOA office was in the community center, a small building that Patricia had turned into her personal fortress. Pictures of herself at various community improvement events covered the walls. Awards she had given herself sat prominently on her desk. Patricia looked up when we entered, her face immediately twisting into that familiar sneer of annoyance. Mrs. Ahmed, how can I help you? Her tone suggested she'd rather help a rabid raccoon. You took my mother's heart monitor yesterday. We need it back. Oh, that little toy? I disposed of it properly. Children's toys have no business in common areas. It's not a toy, my mother said quietly. It's my heart monitor. I have a heart condition. Patricia rolled her eyes dramatically. Everyone has an excuse. Next you'll tell me that plastic thing was some kind of life-saving device. It is, I said, placing my mother's medical records on her desk. She's had 3 heart attacks. Her cardiologist prescribed constant monitoring. Patricia didn't even glance at the papers. Rules are rules. No toys in common areas. If you have a problem with that, you can move. That's when I smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that should have warned her she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. You're absolutely right, Patricia. Rules are rules. Over the next hour, I did something I should have done years ago. I read the HOA bylaws. Every single word. And what I found was beautiful. Section 15.3. Any HOA board member who violates community guidelines is subject to immediate review and potential removal. Section 8.7. Theft of personal property by board members results in automatic suspension pending investigation. Section 12.1. Any action that endangers the health and safety of residents is grounds for criminal charges and civil liability. But the most beautiful part was Section 6.2. All HOA actions must be voted on by the community. Any action taken without proper procedure is void. Patricia had been making decisions for 2 years without a single community vote. I made copies of everything. Then I made phone calls. First, I called Dr. Martinez, Mom's cardiologist, who was horrified to learn someone had taken her monitoring device. He immediately wrote a letter stating that removing the device constituted a clear and present danger to the patient's life. Next, I called the police. Taking someone's medical device? That's theft. Potentially life-threatening theft. Then I called every single person in our community. Every neighbor who had been bullied, fined, or harassed by Patricia Henderson. The response was incredible. Mrs. Garcia brought documentation of every unfair fine. The Johnsons had photos of their son trying to navigate stairs without his ramp. Mr. Pete had veterinary records proving his dog was a legitimate service animal. We had built a case that would make any lawyer proud. The community meeting was scheduled for the next evening. Word spread fast, and by 6 p.m. our small community center was packed. People were standing along the walls, sitting on the floor, some even watching through windows from outside. Patricia walked in looking confident, probably expecting her usual audience of 5 or 6 intimidated residents she could easily control. Her face went pale when she saw the crowd. "What is this?" she demanded. I stood up, holding a thick folder of documents. "This is democracy, Patricia. Something you seem to have forgotten about." I presented everything methodically. Her unauthorized decisions. The money she had spent without approval. The harassment complaints. And finally, the theft of my mother's life-saving medical device. She called it a toy, I told the crowd. She threw away an 82-year-old woman's heart monitor because she thought it was a toy. The room erupted in angry voices. People shouted stories of their own mistreatment. Years of frustration poured out like water through a broken dam. Patricia started to speak, but Mrs. Garcia cut her off. You made me remove flowers from my own window. Flowers that reminded me of my late husband. You tried to have my service dog taken away. Mr. Pete added, his voice shaking with emotion. You made my disabled son crawl upstairs for weeks. Mrs. Johnson cried. Patricia's face was now bright red. You people don't understand. I was maintaining property values. Following guidelines. Whose guidelines? I asked calmly. Because according to our HOA bylaws, every decision you made needed community approval. Every fine you issued was illegal. Every rule you enforced was unauthorized. I handed out copies of the bylaws to everyone present. For 2 years, this woman has been acting like a dictator in our community. She has no legal authority to make the decisions she's been making. And yesterday her illegal actions nearly killed my mother. The vote was unanimous. Patricia Henderson was removed as HOA president immediately. We also voted to reverse every fine she had issued and to pursue legal action for the harassment and theft. But the real victory came when Officer Rodriguez arrived with Patricia's confiscated items. Apparently, she had been hoarding them in her apartment like some kind of twisted trophy collection. My mother's heart monitor was there, along with Mrs. Garcia's flower pots, 3 bicycles from various children, and dozens of other violations Patricia had stolen over the years. When Mom got her monitor back, she started crying again. But these were different tears. I thought I was going to die, she whispered to me. Last night, I felt my heart racing, and I had no way to know if I was in danger. Patricia was arrested that night. Theft of medical equipment, harassment, and fraud. The local news picked up the story, and by morning, HOA Karen Steele's heart monitor was trending on social media. The community decided to operate without an HOA president for a while. Instead, we formed committees where everyone had a voice. Mrs. Garcia started a community garden. The Johnsons organized a wheelchair accessibility improvement project. Mr. Pete began offering free dog training for anyone who needed it. Our little community became what it always should have been, a place where neighbors helped each other instead of tearing each other down. 6 months later, Patricia pled guilty to multiple charges. She was sentenced to community service, specifically helping elderly and disabled residents with their daily needs. The judge thought it was appropriate that she learn to serve instead of control. My mother still sits in the garden every evening, watching the sunset from her favorite bench. But now she's usually surrounded by friends, all of them wearing flowers from Mrs. Garcia's expanded garden, while Mr. Pete's service dog keeps them company. And every evening I check my mother's heart monitor readings on my phone, grateful that a simple device can help keep her safe, and proud that our community finally learned to stand up for what's right. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's making sure the bullies can never hurt anyone again, and building something beautiful from the ashes of their cruelty. The heart monitor beeps steadily now, a gentle reminder that my mother is safe, surrounded by people who care about her, in a community where kindness finally won over cruelty. And Patricia? Well, last I heard she was learning to be helpful instead of harmful. Maybe there's hope for everyone, even HOA Karens who steal heart monitors and call them toys.